The wind howled across the cliffside, carrying with it the sharp scent of the mountains. Evan pressed himself against the cold rock, his small hands clutching a piece of stale bread. He stared at the massive dragon perched just a few feet away. Its scales shimmered in the weak sunlight, black with streaks of deep blue. Everyone in the village said dragons were dangerous. They said no human should ever come close. But Evan felt something different. There was no anger in the dragon's eyes. There was only loneliness. The dragon's gaze met Evan's, and for a moment, the boy felt a strange calm. He stepped closer, slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. The dragon lowered its head slightly, and Evan understood that it was not going to attack. He held out the bread. The dragon sniffed it with its long snout, then carefully took it from his hand. Evan's heart raced. He had fed a dragon, and it had not burned him to ashes. Days passed, and Evan returned to the cliff every chance he got. He brought small things, scraps of bread, pieces of dried meat, even a torn cloak. The dragon, who he started calling Kale in his mind, would wait for him each time. Sometimes, Evan talked to Kale, telling the dragon about the village, about school, and even about his dreams. He could not understand the dragon's thoughts, but Kale seemed to listen. The giant creature would tilt its head, its amber eyes soft and intelligent. Evan began to feel that Kale understood him more than the villagers ever could. Not everyone was pleased. Villagers noticed Evan's long absences. His mother worried endlessly, and his father shook his head in silent disapproval. "Stay away from the cliff, Evan," his father said. "Do not tempt fate. The dragon is not a friend." But Evan only smiled and slipped away the next day back to the cliff. He could not help himself. There was something calling him there, something he could not ignore. One evening, the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped behind the mountains. Evan reached the cliff and found Kale waiting. The dragon's wings stretched wide, and the wind made them ripple like liquid shadows. Evan climbed onto a small boulder and sat beside Kale. For a long moment, neither spoke nor moved. Then Evan whispered, "Do you feel alone too?" Kale made a low, rumbling sound, almost like a sigh. Evan's hand brushed against the dragon's rough scales, and he felt a strange warmth, as if the dragon was sharing a piece of its life with him. The boy had learned a few things about Kale over the days. The dragon was not like the legends. It did not seek to burn villages or destroy farms. Its wings were powerful, but it never flew recklessly. Its claws were sharp, but it had never used them against Evan. Most of all, it was lonely. Evan's heart ached for the creature. Every day, Kale waited for him, and every day, Evan returned. It was a friendship built on silence, patience, and trust. Word of Evan's strange friendship slowly spread. Children in the village whispered about the boy who sat with a dragon, calling him crazy or brave. Some adults scolded him, warning him of danger. Dragons do not forgive. One mistake and you will pay, they said. Evan only nodded politely. He knew the villagers could not see what he saw. They could not feel the quiet understanding that passed between him and Kale. One night, Evan lay awake in his small room thinking about Kale. The moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating his small hands. He imagined what it would be like to fly, to feel the wind beneath his feet and soar with the dragon above the cliffs. The thought filled him with excitement and fear at the same time. He had no wings, no magic, no special skill, only trust. And yet, that trust felt stronger than anything else he had ever known. The next morning, Evan returned to the cliff before sunrise. The air was crisp and a thin layer of frost covered the rocks. Kale was already there, resting his massive head on his folded wings. Evan carefully placed his hand on the dragon's snout. Kale's warm breath washed over his face, and for a moment, Evan closed his eyes, feeling safe in a way he never had in the village. He realized that Kale had become more than a dragon to him. Kale was a companion, a protector, and perhaps, in some small way, a friend who could understand him completely. As the days went on, Evan began noticing other dragons in the distance, gliding silently in the skies above the mountains. They never came close, and he did not know if they were aware of him. Kale never mentioned them, but sometimes he would lift his head and stare toward the horizon, his eyes following the shadows in the clouds. Evan felt a mix of curiosity and unease. What did the other dragons want? Would they accept him? Could he ever speak to them? One afternoon, a sudden noise startled Evan. A branch snapped, and he turned to see villagers approaching the cliff. Panic surged through him, but Kale rose instantly, wings spreading wide. The dragon's presence was intimidating, and the villagers froze. Evan ran forward, trying to calm them. "It's okay. Kale won't hurt you," he shouted. His voice trembled, but Kale did not attack. The villagers hesitated, fear and disbelief in their eyes. Slowly they backed away, murmuring warnings and disbelief. Evan held his ground, feeling both pride and fear. That night, Evan sat again beside Kale, exhausted but exhilarated. He whispered, "Maybe one day they will understand." Kale lowered his massive head, and Evan felt a soft nudge against his shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it filled Evan with hope. The boy and the dragon sat together in silence, watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. In that quiet moment, Evan knew that their friendship had begun something new, a bond that could change not just his life but perhaps, one day, the world itself. The wind rose again, carrying the scent of distant lands and untold adventures. Evan clenched his fists, determination burning in his chest. One day the villagers would see what he saw. One day the dragons would no longer be feared, only respected. But for now he would sit beside Kale, sharing the quiet moments of trust, friendship and hope, while the world remained full of fear and doubt. And for the first time, Evan felt that fear did not matter because some friendships were bigger than the world itself. Evan woke before dawn, the sky still dark and quiet. He hurried to the cliff, clutching a small bundle of bread and dried meat. Kale was already there, sitting tall and alert, his wings folded neatly against his sides. The boy approached carefully, but the dragon did not move. It seemed to sense something different today. Evan noticed shadows in the distant sky, shapes that moved fast, gliding silently above the mountains. Other dragons. He had never seen them this close before. Kale lifted his head and sniffed the wind, amber eyes sharp and calculating. Evan felt a shiver run down his spine. The other dragons were watching, and he realized they might be curious about him and Kale. He whispered softly, "Do they know me? Do they trust you?" Kale made a low rumble, a sound that was both comforting and warning. Evan understood it as, "Be careful. They're not like me." The boy spent the morning near Kale, sharing food and talking quietly. He told the dragon about the village, about the children who laughed at him, and the elders who scolded his parents for letting him wander. Kale listened, eyes following the movement of the other dragons in the distance. Evan noticed a pattern. Whenever he spoke, the dragons in the sky paused and hovered for a moment as if listening. It made him wonder if dragons had their own way of communicating beyond the human senses. By midday, the village was alive with activity, unaware of what was happening on the cliffs. Children ran through the streets and merchants shouted from their stalls. Evan's absence did not go unnoticed. His mother called his name several times, worry in her voice. "Evan, come home. You cannot stay out all day." He ignored the calls, focused on Kale and the shadows above. He had learned that some moments were too important to be interrupted. Kale rose suddenly, wings stretching wide. Evan felt the familiar rush of wind as the dragon's body shifted, sensing something in the distance. Evan held on tight to a ridge, his heart pounding. A small group of dragons had broken away from the larger formation. They flew closer, circling above him and Kale, their scales reflecting the sun in flashes of red, green, and silver. Evan felt both fear and awe. He had never imagined dragons so close, so real, so alive. The largest dragon among them lowered its head, eyes locking with Evan's. It seemed to study him, as if trying to understand why a human was not fleeing or attacking. Evan swallowed hard. His palms were sweaty, but he did not move away. He raised the piece of bread toward the dragon, offering it silently. The dragon tilted its massive head, curious, and then flapped its wings once, a silent signal to the others. Evan realized it was a test. He needed to show patience, trust, and respect, just as he had with Kale. Hours passed, and Evan continued to sit near Kale. He mimicked Kale's movements, moving slowly and deliberately. When Kale dipped his head or shifted slightly, Evan followed. The dragons above seemed to relax. Evan felt a thrill of excitement. Maybe they were beginning to accept him, even if just a little. It was not friendship yet, but it was something. A start. In the late afternoon, Evan noticed smoke rising from a distant part of the mountains. His curiosity grew, and he wondered if it was a fire or perhaps another threat. Kale sniffed the air and made a soft, warning sound. Evan nodded. He had begun to understand Kale's instincts better than his own sometimes. Together, they crept closer to the source of the smoke, careful not to be seen by villagers or the other dragons above. When they reached a ridge, Evan gasped. A small group of aliens had landed far in the valley. Their metal suits gleamed under the sun, and they moved with precision, scanning the landscape. Evan did not understand their language, but he could feel their intent. They were exploring, searching, and they were not friendly. Kale growled low in his throat, a sound that vibrated in Evan's chest. The boy understood the warning clearly. The dragons above were not just watching him, they were watching the world. Evan realized something important. The dragons had knowledge humans did not. They could see danger coming before it arrived, sense threats that were invisible to the eye. He wondered how they had survived so long, feared by humans yet so wise and observant. He felt pride in his friendship with Kale, knowing it had given him a glimpse into something far bigger than his village. That night, Evan returned to the cliff with Kale, exhausted but alive with wonder. The stars sparkled above, and the distant silhouettes of dragons were still visible, gliding silently across the sky. Evan whispered, "Do they watch over us too?" Kale nudged him gently as if to say yes, but only if we are ready. Evan's thoughts wandered back to the village. He knew the villagers would never believe him. They would dismiss the dragons as monsters, dangerous and untrustworthy. Yet Evan had seen the truth. Dragons were intelligent, protective, and aware. They were not enemies, and perhaps one day humans could understand them. The boy spent hours that night lying on the cliff, staring at Kale's massive form. He imagined flying above the village, guiding people to safety, and showing them that dragons were not to be feared. But first he needed trust. Trust between humans and dragons was fragile, and Evan knew he could not force it. He could only show kindness, patience, and courage. The wind whispered around him, carrying the scent of distant forests and mountains. Evan smiled. He felt connected to something greater than himself, a bond stretching across the sky and touching creatures no human had ever truly understood. He closed his eyes, imagining the dragons circling above the village, watching over it silently, waiting for the right moment to show their true power. Evan finally stood, brushing frost from his clothes. He whispered to Kale, "Tomorrow we will try again. We will show them that we are not afraid, that we can trust each other." Kale rumbled softly, folding his wings as if agreeing. The boy and the dragon walked back down the cliffside together, the stars reflecting in Kale's amber eyes. Evan knew the path ahead would be dangerous, full of doubt and fear. But he also knew one thing. The dragons had chosen to watch him, and in return he would watch over them and his village too. And for the first time, Evan understood that the sky was not just empty space. It was alive, full of whispers, full of watchers, and full of possibilities. The morning sun painted the cliffs with gold as Evan made his way to Kale. The boy's heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. Today, Kale had lifted his massive wings higher than usual, and Evan understood it was time for something new. He had spent weeks learning patience, trust, and quiet communication with the dragon. Now Kale seemed ready to share something bigger. Evan approached slowly, holding a piece of bread in his hand. Kale's amber eyes watched him carefully. The other dragons had disappeared from the skies, leaving only Kale and the boy on the cliff. Evan whispered, "Are we ready?" Kale tilted his head, and the low rumble that came from his throat felt like agreement. Evan took a deep breath and climbed onto a sturdy rock near Kale's shoulder. His small fingers brushed against the dragon's rough scales. At first, Kale stayed still as if testing Evan's courage. Then, with a sudden push of his wings, he lifted off the ground. Evan gripped tightly, his stomach twisting with fear and excitement. The wind roared past him, carrying the scent of mountains, trees, and distant rivers. His legs dangled, and his heart raced faster than it ever had. Below, the village looked tiny like a painting. Evan realized how small humans seemed from the sky, and how vast the world really was. Kale soared higher, banking gracefully over the cliffs. Evan felt the power in every flap of the dragon's wings. The air was cold and sharp, but exhilarating. He shouted with laughter, unable to contain the thrill. Kale's wings cut through the clouds, moving with precision and intelligence. For the first time, Evan truly understood the dragon's strength and freedom. He felt honored to share this flight with Kale, trusted to hold on and be part of the skies. The boy tried to speak, but the wind stole his words. Instead, he pressed his face closer to Kale, feeling the warmth of the dragon's scales and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Kale's eyes flicked toward the horizon, scanning the distance as he had done for weeks. Evan realized the dragon was aware of everything, the land, the mountains, even the village below. He felt awe and respect for Kale, understanding that dragons were far wiser than humans gave them credit for. After a while, Kale dipped down toward a quiet valley. Evan's stomach flipped as they descended, the ground rushing closer. The dragon landed softly on a small plateau, wings folding with a whisper of wind. Evan slid off, legs trembling but filled with joy. He looked at Kale and whispered, "Thank you. I understand now." Kale's low rumble vibrated in response as if acknowledging the boy's words. Evan noticed movement in the distance, shadows among the trees. The villagers had followed him, curious and cautious. They froze when they saw the massive dragon beside the boy. Children clung to their parents, and elders stared with fear and disbelief. It's a dragon," one of the villagers whispered. Another muttered, "The boy, he's crazy to sit with it." Evan's heart ached for their fear, but he knew they could not yet see what he saw. He stepped forward trying to calm them. "It won't hurt you," he shouted, voice shaking with urgency. The dragon's eyes shifted toward the villagers, but it stayed calm, lowering its head slightly. Slowly, a few villagers took hesitant steps forward. They saw the dragon's scales glint in the sunlight, noticed its careful, non-threatening movements. For a brief moment, fear mixed with awe. Evan used the chance to teach them, speaking softly about what he had learned. Dragons are intelligent. They are not monsters. They watch, they protect, and they can understand us if we trust them. Some villagers scoffed, but others whispered among themselves, curiosity breaking through their fear. The children stared wide-eyed, imagining what it would feel like to fly beside a dragon. Evan realized that the first step toward understanding was showing the dragon's true nature. That night, Evan returned to the cliff alone, Kale by his side. The sky was dark, stars scattered like diamonds. He thought about the villagers, about how long it would take for them to truly believe him. He knew it would not be easy. Fear ran deep in their hearts and trust had to be earned. Yet Evan felt hope. Today they had seen a glimpse of what dragons could be. Kale nudged Evan gently, reminding him of the bond they shared. Evan stroked the dragon's neck, feeling the smooth power of the scales beneath his fingers. He realized that trust was not just about flying or feeding or sitting quietly. Trust was about understanding, patience, and courage, the courage to believe in something others feared. Evan knew he was learning far more than he had ever expected. Over the next few days, Evan practiced more flights with Kale. Each time he grew bolder, more confident. He began to notice how Kale responded to his movements, adjusting speed and height to keep the boy safe. Evan felt a connection to the dragon that went beyond words, a partnership built on respect and care. Sometimes he would close his eyes mid-flight, trusting Kale completely, feeling the wind rush past like a river of freedom. One afternoon, as they soared above the cliffs, Evan spotted the distant shapes of other dragons circling in the sky. They watched silently, but this time, Evan did not feel fear. He understood that Kale had prepared him, that patience and trust had earned a place among them. The boy wondered what messages the other dragons carried, what wisdom they held. Perhaps one day he would learn from them too. Evan landed beside Kale, the sun warming his face. He felt stronger, braver, and more alive than ever. He realized that this first flight was not just about the thrill or adventure, it was about learning trust, understanding, and courage. The boy looked out at the horizon, imagining the challenges and discoveries ahead. Kale rumbled softly beside him, a silent promise that they would face whatever came next together. And for the first time, Evan understood that the bond between human and dragon was something rare and powerful. Something that could change not only his life, but perhaps the lives of everyone in the village, if they could learn to see beyond fear. The sky turned a strange, glowing red early in the morning. The villagers ran from their homes, shouting and pointing toward the horizon. Evan stood on the cliff with Kale, heart pounding. The distant shapes in the sky were not clouds or dragons this time. They were alien ships, enormous and metallic, moving with a cold, precise rhythm. The village below trembled as the ships fired beams into the mountains, sending rocks tumbling and smoke rising into the sky. Fear gripped everyone. Evan grabbed Kale's thick scales and whispered, "They are here. We have to protect them." Kale growled low, spreading his massive wings. The dragon's shadow fell across the village, and for the first time, the humans below could see the size and power of his kind. Other dragons appeared silently in the skies, circling above the alien ships, moving as if they were reading the attackers' intentions. Evan realized that today the dragons would not be ignored, they would take a stand. Evan ran toward the village with Kale gliding just above him. Villagers froze in terror at the sight of a boy running beneath a dragon, but Evan shouted, "Get inside. Stay safe. The dragons are helping us." Some listened, some still screamed, but Evan did not stop. He climbed onto Kale's back, feeling the warmth and strength of the dragon. "Show them, Kale. Show them we are not alone," he urged. Kale roared, a sound so deep it shook the mountains. Other dragons answered, rising higher and circling around the alien ships. The aliens fired at the dragons, but the creatures moved with skill and intelligence, dodging attacks with impossible precision. Fire and wind blended as the dragons fought, not recklessly but strategically. They shielded the village, forcing the aliens to retreat, their weapons useless against creatures that could think and act together. Villagers watched in disbelief. The dragons were not monsters. They were protectors. Parents clutched their children, hearts pounding as they witnessed the battle unfold. Evan shouted, "See! They are not here to harm us. They are helping." Some villagers began to understand, slowly lowering their fear. Their eyes followed the dragons as they swooped down to push away the smaller alien probes, protecting livestock and homes from destruction. Kale landed near the village edge, wings folding with precision. Evan jumped off, brushing dirt from his clothes. He ran from house to house, guiding people to safety, while dragons flanked the perimeter. The bond between human and dragon was clear now, visible to anyone who looked. Fear still lingered, but trust had begun to grow. Villagers who had mocked him before now watched Evan with new eyes, seeing courage and wisdom in the boy they had once ignored. The alien ships regrouped, firing once more, but the dragons met them head-on. They moved as one, wings and claws coordinating with intelligence far beyond human understanding. Evan felt both awe and hope. Kale flew beside him, powerful and calm. Together they were not just boy and dragon, they were leaders, guiding the humans and dragons alike. By afternoon the aliens began to retreat. Their ships shimmered in the light and then vanished over the horizon. The village had been saved, not by weapons, not by walls, but by creatures humans had feared for centuries. Smoke rose from a few damaged homes, but lives were spared. The villagers slowly emerged from their hiding places, eyes wide with amazement and gratitude. Evan stood with Kale on the cliff again, looking down at the village. Children ran to him, pointing at the dragons and whispering excitedly. Parents followed, hesitant but curious. Some elders approached, shaking their heads, still unsure but moved by what they had seen. Evan realized that the first step toward real change had been made. The dragons were no longer distant myths. They were allies, protectors, and teachers. Kale nudged Evan gently with his massive head. The boy stroked the dragon's scales, feeling warmth and strength. "We did it," Evan whispered. Kale's low rumble answered, a sound that felt like pride. The dragons had chosen to stand beside the village, and Evan had shown humans that friendship and trust were possible. That evening, the villagers gathered around the edge of the cliffs, looking up at the dragons resting nearby. They whispered to one another, talking about bravery and kindness, about courage and wisdom. Fear had not disappeared, but it had been replaced by a new understanding. Children laughed, pointing at the dragon's glinting eyes, imagining the impossible, while adults considered a world where humans and dragons could coexist. Evan walked among the villagers, explaining calmly about trust and courage, about how dragons were intelligent and capable of empathy. Slowly he could see change. Eyes softened, lips turned from frowns to small smiles. The boy who had been alone on the cliffs now became a bridge between worlds, showing that fear could be overcome by understanding and compassion. Kale and the other dragons rested near the village that night. Their shadows stretched long in the moonlight, guardians in silence. Evan sat beside Kale once more, listening to the gentle rumble of his breath. He thought about the alien threat and realized that the dragon's wisdom had saved them all. Humans had weapons, but dragons had strategy, instinct, and care. The combination of the two made them unstoppable when united. Evan looked at the stars, thinking about the future. The aliens might return, other dangers might come, but now humans and dragons would face them together. He had learned courage, trust, and leadership. Kale had taught him patience, understanding, and strength. Together, they had shown the village a new way forward, a future where fear did not control hearts, and where even the smallest boy could make a difference beside the largest dragon. And as the night wind whispered through the trees and cliffs, Evan realized something he had known all along. Dragons were not enemies. They were friends, protectors, and a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful bonds were the ones built on trust, patience, and courage. The village would never be the same again, and neither would he. The sun rose gently over the village, casting warm light on the roofs and fields. Birds sang, and the villagers moved quietly, still amazed by what had happened the day before. Evan walked through the streets with Kale close behind, the dragon's massive shadow stretching across the ground. The boy felt a mixture of pride and hope. The villagers had begun to see what he had known all along. Dragons were not enemies. Children ran toward Evan, their eyes wide with excitement. "Can we touch the dragon?" one asked. Evan smiled, kneeling to meet their gaze. "Kale is gentle," he said softly. "But you must be calm and kind. Dragons can feel fear just like humans." The children nodded eagerly, stepping closer with care. Kale lowered his head slightly, amber eyes soft. The dragon's warm breath ruffled the hair of the nearest child, and a small laugh escaped from the boy. The elders watched from a distance, still cautious but intrigued. Some shook their heads, unable to believe what they were seeing. Others whispered about courage and trust, realizing that the dragons had saved their homes and families. Evan spoke to them patiently, explaining what he had learned while sitting with Kale on the cliffs, about dragons' intelligence and loyalty. Slowly the villagers began to understand. Fear was fading, replaced by curiosity and respect. Evan led Kale to the open fields outside the village. The boy wanted to show everyone that dragons could help, not harm. Kale moved carefully, circling the fields and demonstrating his strength without causing damage. The villagers watched, some holding hands, some whispering to each other. The sight of dragons moving gracefully, aware of their surroundings, changed something deep inside them. For the first time they felt that dragons could be allies, not monsters. Over the next days, Evan taught the children small ways to approach and communicate with dragons. Simple gestures, gentle movements, and calm voices became part of their lessons. Kale and the other dragons observed, responding with quiet acknowledgement. Evan saw the trust growing between humans and dragons, small but steady, like a fire beginning to burn. The village began to hum with a new energy, a mix of wonder and cautious hope. Evan's parents watched from the edge of the village, relief and pride on their faces. They had feared for their son's safety, but now they saw the wisdom in his courage. His mother approached him one evening, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You were right," she said softly. "They're not what we feared. Thank you, Evan, for showing us the truth." Evan smiled, feeling warmth in his chest. It had not been easy, but he had helped change hearts. Kale stayed close to Evan, a silent guardian and friend. The dragon had taught him more than courage. He had taught him patience, trust, and understanding. Evan realized that the dragons had been watching humans for a long time, waiting for someone brave enough to see beyond fear. He felt honored to be that person, to be the bridge between the two worlds. The villagers began to rebuild the homes and fields damaged by the alien attack. They worked together with the dragons, using their strength and intelligence to clear debris and repair structures. Children laughed as they helped carry small stones or guided Kale through open spaces. Adults marveled at the dragon's precision and care. For the first time, humans and dragons worked side by side, learning from each other. One night, Evan sat on the cliff with Kale, looking at the stars. "Do you think they will return?" he asked softly. Kale rumbled low in response, a sound that meant both yes and no, uncertainty and caution. Evan nodded. He understood that the galaxy held dangers, but now humans were not alone. They had allies in the skies, creatures that were powerful, wise, and protective. Together they could face anything. The village slowly changed. Fear of dragons became a story of the past. Children played near the cliffs, always under careful watch, learning to respect the creatures that once inspired terror. Adults spoke openly about trust and courage, about the lessons Evan had taught them. Even the elders began to see that fear was not always wisdom. Sometimes, understanding and compassion were stronger than weapons. Evan walked through the village one afternoon, watching people and dragons share the land. Farmers guided Kale and the other dragons as they carried supplies and helped with heavy work. Children laughed as they ran alongside the dragons, their joy unafraid. Evan smiled, realizing that what had begun with a simple act of sitting beside a lonely dragon had grown into something much greater, a true bond between humans and dragons. He thought about the cliffs where he had first met Kale. The fear, the excitement, the quiet conversations, they had all led to this moment. A boy and a dragon had changed the hearts of a village. He looked up at Kale, who rumbled softly in acknowledgement. Evan whispered, "We did it, Kale. They understand now." The dragon nudged him gently, amber eyes full of warmth. From that day on, humans and dragons lived together in peace. The village flourished, stronger and wiser than before. Evan became a teacher, showing others how to build trust, how to approach fear with courage, and how to see the world through understanding. Kale stayed near him, always a reminder that friendship could cross the greatest divides. And when the wind swept across the cliffs and fields, carrying the scent of mountains, trees, and open skies, Evan knew the future was bright. Humans and dragons, once separated by fear and misunderstanding, were now allies, ready to face the unknown together. The boy who had once sat alone beside a dragon had shown the village, and perhaps the world, that trust, courage, and friendship could change everything. In the quiet evening, Evan and Kale watched the sun set together. The village below was alive with laughter and life, dragons resting nearby, humans walking freely among them. Evan felt a deep, peaceful joy. This was not just a victory over fear, it was a new beginning. And in that new beginning, humans and dragons would face the future side by side, stronger and wiser than ever before.